Hello and welcome to another episode of You, Me, and Ennui. This season, we're covering everything and all topics related to work. So today's topic is specifically related to the idea of work or career versus a vocation. Now, a vocation, you might be familiar with the term related to vocation to maybe a religious order, becoming a priest or a nun, but we're here to unpack, a broader understanding of that word and, really understand that through the experience of today's guest, who I'm really excited to introduce. Her name is Julie Laudick Dougherty. She runs Oxbow Farm, a Catholic worker-inspired farm in Parkton, Maryland, along with her husband, John, who is a professor of economics at Loyola University. The farm offers a CSA produce subscription on a sliding scale and provides fresh food access in a food desert throughout the Govans Farm Market. They also offer hospitality and ecological education to a variety of short-term and long-term guests and volunteers. Julie holds an MS in agroecology from Ohio State University and is pursuing a master's of theological studies at Loyola. Welcome, Julie.
Yes, thank you. Glad to be here.
So good to have you. I was waiting for you to step in and correct me and say the Ohio State
Oh
University,
gosh.
but maybe that's just because you're a really nice person and a very kind and gracious guest.
Yeah, I can't I mean, Ohio State is a good institution. It's a great institution. I certainly am not one that has a lot of football pride, so it's not a big deal to me. So,
Understood. Yeah, I have a few friends who went to OSU and they are big football fans. So maybe that's the distinction. Thank you for
yeah.
that little tidbit. Well, we're not here to talk about football. We are here to talk about work. And I gave a little preview from your bio, but I think our listeners would really love to know more about your story and your career journey. How did you become a farmer?
Yes, there's as with everything, there's a long story and a short story. The short story is I kind of just ran out of other options of things that I had tried. Um, and I guess a little bit of the longer story is I went into college thinking I wanted to do something in engineering, but I was gonna have a fun major like philosophy, on the side. And I actually ended up through philosophy falling in love with biology. So I became a biology and philosophy double major instead. And then, junior, senior year comes along, you start to try to figure out what am I going to do with my life? Like, how do I put these careers into action in a meaningful way? And my 20 something year old self um, definitely had some very like idealistic thoughts about what I would do and how I was going to go out and change the world. Like I had done a lot of service work and I had done some volunteer work in Mexico and Panama, and just like really had a passion for serving others. And I wanted that to be like the main thing, but I also felt this drive to like use my education and um, do something more than like just farming or just I don't know, just working at like one nonprofit. I just had this sense that I wanted to do something bigger. So for lack of, you know, direction, I just stayed in school and went to grad school after graduating. I was inspired partly to study environmental science and farming. I knew I wanted to do something in the field of ecology, because when I was volunteering at a nonprofit in Panama, I was there doing water quality work, just helping people diagnose and treat waterborne pathogens. We interviewed indigenous farmers and some other people in the village and found that like a lot of the water quality issues were actually coming from export farms upstream that had poor soil management practices. So you end up with a lot more runoff and pathogens from the animals in the water. And, while these villages lacked access to technology and all kinds of modern luxuries, like they were actually doing pretty okay before we, started introducing more of our modern illnesses and things. So my position kind of shifted from like, okay, we're going to go out and like help the world to like, what do other cultures have to teach us about what a healthy lifestyle looks like? And
Mm,
I really realized that like they have such a solid sense of priorities in life. The subsistence farming community that I worked for, they just, you know, they have modest homes. They grow their own food, like they prioritize family. And up until pretty recent times, they didn't even use money. They used a trade and barter system. And then once money got involved, they start importing junk food, and then they start having problems like diabetes and heart disease, and then they need doctors,
Hmm.
and then they have all this plastic waste that they didn't have before. So normally, natural waste is just compostable. You throw it in a pile and it breaks down. If it's plastic, you throw it in a pile and it doesn't go anywhere. So you have to do something about it. And well, what do? We burn it. And then they burn it next to a school and the kids start having asthma. And I was just so overwhelmed by like, oh my gosh, just like all of these modern horrors are creeping into like what seemed like a society that was actually doing all right to begin with. And like, how do we get back to some of those basic fundamental good things about what it means to just live on this earth and love our neighbors. um yeah, so that really inspired me to stay in the States, pursue a graduate education. And I figured, okay, I'll do something in like farming and science because we have all kinds of agricultural problems in the United States. And my master's was on soil microbial ecology, so like beneficial microorganisms for crops, kind of like probiotics for plants is another way to think of it. And it was really great. I worked with organic farmers across the state, and I really enjoyed the process. But when it came time to graduate, I realized that for me, the pace of academic research was just like too slow. You can ask one question at a time, usually, maybe a couple, depending on how you design your experiment. And it takes a couple years to just get like one answer. And the more I talked to farmers and the more I really started trying to ask, like, what do we need? Like, what is the root problem here? The problem isn't so much that we don't know how to farm well. It's not a lack of access to information. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's just a lack of action and putting things into practice. Um, so that kind of got me thinking about like, okay, maybe I want to do something more directly with farmers rather than research. And after grad school, I worked in organic certification for a couple of years. It was just kind of like I knew I didn't want to do it long term, but it was like a way to meet people and figure things out. And it was also a job that paid pretty well because like farming jobs, nonprofit jobs, um, you're lucky if you make more than 20,000 a year. And a lot of
Really?
people like
Wow.
on the ground. Yeah. Or like actually, and some organizations are getting better funded, but a lot of people that run like small scale organic, um, like for profit farms are like 30,000, 40,000 is pretty good. And there are some people that get a really good system. They have a market, they can sell it in a big city like DC and bring in more money and, get up to like six figures of income and start hiring people and stuff. But it's hard. You almost have to be like superhuman to like successfully manage a farm as a business. So I was just not sure if I wanted to do that.
Yeah, I can
Um,
understand. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and meanwhile, I'm helping farmers in this organic certification position, answering questions about what inputs they're allowed to use, and how to make sure they're all, natural substances and stuff like that. Um, and I'm sitting on the desk side of the job, making a pretty comfortable salary, and they're out there working sun up to sun down, like just you can just hear the like excitement and passion, but also just the exasperation and like Sisyphusian task of trying to make this all work. And just a number of factors for me in that job. I actually became clinically depressed. When I was in grad school, I was doing experiments. So I would spend some of my time in the lab, some of
Mm.
my time outside growing like field crops and stuff like that. And spending 40 hours a week at a desk, like thinking about all these big world problems and stuff, it just was not a mental health environment that I could handle. So when I
Mm.
was joking about like I just ran out of other things to do, I was at the point where I realized like I can't work inside for 40 hours a week. And I can't like I just need to like I have this passion. I need to like throw myself into something. And I was at the point where I didn't even feel that passion anymore. I felt like a zombie.
Mm.
And I knew I needed to make a change. So um yeah, that's when I decided to just go off the deep end and take a pay cut and get into it.
I mean, gosh, thank you for sharing so vulnerably about like that last part of your journey. But I also want to commend something that you said like at the top of when you were talking about your studies that I think really hits on something that like a lot of people can relate to when like comes to discerning like a career and like what you really not like capital S should be doing, but like what you really like are meant to be doing is that you said, you had your one major and then you had your fun major and how, philosophy is kind of what brought you the first step that brought you towards this journey of understanding, I'm going to butcher some of the terms with the ecology. And also it just sounded like as difficult and challenging as parts of your journey were, there were moments where you just followed like the promptings of like your heart or your mind towards what felt right for you. And I just wanted to like really commend that. And I think there's a lot that anyone can learn, even if they're not, you know, deciding to become a farmer. But it's really hitting on a theme that we want to talk about is like really understanding like what it is that you are not called to do, but really like what's going to propel you so you don't become this 40-hour a week, person or not feeling like yourself. It sounds like you weren't feeling like yourself. And really, work is a really big chunk of our lives. And if we don't feel like ourselves when we're doing it, then, that's going to have adverse effects. So I really want to like lift up and thank you for sharing that and also lift up the parts of your journey that sound like they really brought you to at least where you're supposed to be right now. So, it's besides those moments of should or even I love the rawness of there you'd really exhausted all of your options. So I wanted to ask, how did you discern that this was the career for you and you felt like you really had nothing else? But you know, what were the steps or like what was that moment like for you when you thought or what did it feel like when you decided for yourself, I want to try to be a farmer or go into this line of work?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question. Because all the way back in college, like, when I had first met, the farmers that we worked with in Panama, I just had a sense of, like, "Wow, I kinda wanna be like these people," and for a while, I
Mm,
just joked, like, "Wouldn't it be so simple to just be a farmer?" As if it was, like, a
right, right.
easier or simpler, like, it's definitely not a simple life path. Um, I mean, in some ways it is, but yeah, I I think for me, a lot of it had to do with realizing the power of settling down into a particular place and a particular community and just loving your neighbors. Um, so like, for me, a big part of it too is like, trying to fulfill a Christian vocation, like serving God,
Mm,
serving others. And I, you know, I had a great education. I felt a kind of pressure to do something big, you know, like as if like just running a farm wasn't enough. Um,
right. And not
yeah.
to cut you off, but just for our listeners, I want them to really understand like the community because I love what you're saying. But can you tell them a little bit more about the community that you immediately moved into? It was the Shepherd's Corner Ecology Center, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that was actually kind of a big, like, I told you the kind of more academic side of the story. That was a parallel thing happening all the way back when I was in high school. I was not Catholic at the time. I wasn't raised Catholic, but I did a service project volunteering for these Dominican sisters.
Hmm.
Um, and they run a farm and ecology center just outside of Columbus, Ohio, where I grew up. And I just helped build a trail through the woods for my senior project, and I was like, "Wow, this is," it just planted some seeds. Like, I really had an appreciation for, like, these sisters, like, one of their, like, um, missions is to just, like, love our it's called Shepherd's Corner, so it's like, this is, like, our little corner of God's creation, and, like, we're gonna take care of it. And at the time, I think I, like, thought of that as, like, "Well, that's really great for them, but, like, what about the rest of the world?" You know? So when I went to college, I joined the Catholic Church, then I kinda got more into, like, farming and ecology, and when I came back to Ohio State for grad school, I was in Ohio again, and I thought, "Well, wow, I should really reconnect with these sisters." So I was on their board, when I was working in organic certification, and um, it was just really neat to stay in touch and see what they were doing. And it turns out they
Hmm.
had gone through like a lot of different farm managers in the last couple of years, and the previous one quit. It's a very low paying job, and they needed to hire somebody, and this was lined up perfectly, like God's plans. With just I was at my breaking point. I was like, I can't keep,
Hmm.
and not that there's anything wrong with a 40-hour a week office job. Like the job that I was doing was for an awesome organization. We were doing really good work. Like I felt a sense of purpose in the mission of the organization and everything. But like for me, I just knew physically I needed something different. I needed to make a change. So I applied for the farm manager position at Shepherd's Corner, and it was great. It was just like I slowly came out of this like zombie coma state. And I'm not sure if the sisters like totally knew how how out of it I was, or how much I needed that change. But just starting from things like, the first thing you do is get to the greenhouse going, and you start planting seedlings and you watch them grow, and there's just like this sense of life and gratification. And um but yeah, definitely the fact that like I loved and believed in their mission. um I don't know. I had thought about just applying as a farmhand at like a couple different organizations, and it's hard to like work really hard for almost no pay if you don't believe in.
Yeah, it sounds like the mission really
Yeah,
drew you in. And I can share, and if folks have listened to season one, like I've had a very not I had some I can relate to your experience. I used to work in a very corporate environment, and I sure burnout was factored in, but it was really more that I was looking around at my colleagues and they were just on fire for what they did. And like when I took stock of myself, I just thought, like, I'm fine, but I'm not on fire and like I'd like to be. And so that's what led me to work into more of a mission driven environment. And I immediately saw the change in myself, and I saw those benefits from working with folks who are aligned in a mission that you believe in. So I wanted to, this feeds well into my next question, was
yeah.
that, what does this mean for you, for it to be a vocation for your life and not just a job to make money with? Because you've been really honest, it's not as much money as you typically would expect. So, but I also, taking a step back, like from my experience, I can speak, when I made the move, it was less about running from and more about running to. And so, and the positives. And so I would love to hear from you, like what have been those positives, and, what does it mean for you for this to be a vocation?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest draws is that, got me thinking about farming in the first place is like like if, from a Christian tradition anyways, or Jewish tradition as well, like farming is the original vocation that God gives Adam and Eve in the garden, like till the earth and to
So
keep it.
true.
And yeah, and I think that I've always kind of questioned what is my participation in the economy doing? Like there's so much inequality and poverty and problems. And I yeah, I definitely have gone through a lot of phases where I just wonder, like, especially with Jesus' call to like follow him and leave possessions behind. And we're also inspired by the Catholic worker, and Dorothy Day talks a lot about like making ourselves poor and giving to others. But the thing about farming is like at the end of the day, I know what I did. Like I grew food and I fed people. I fed myself, I
Mm,
fed my family. Um, and we're taking good care of the earth, of God's creation in the meantime. So like a lot of these big existential questions about like what's the meaning of all of it, whatever. Just putting in the hard work, the sweaty work, feeling exhausted at the end of the day, and just um, knowing that you did what you could is a good feeling.
I love that. I love that. And I love that you're getting into the more of course you're a farmer, so you're getting into like the rolling your sleeves up aspect of your job. And I guess I completely skated over the more practical questions because we were getting really into the deep philosophical, which I love. But more like practically speaking, can you talk about what your farm looks like, and also related but not related, what did your parents think when you said, I want to be a farmer? Two very different questions, but two very practical ones.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think over time they got it, you know. At first, my mom was great, but she was always like, "Oh, you need to be a doctor. You're gonna, you do so well in school. You're gonna like cure cancer or whatever."
Mm,
And I think that when I took the dive to start managing the farm with the sisters, I think she was like, "Okay, this is cool. Like, it's a good mission, temporary thing." And then she slowly, came, saw what we were doing on volunteer days or plant sale fundraiser and stuff like that. And she started to see, I think both my parents really started to appreciate like the community around it and just how much it really like brings people a sense of life. My mom is really into uh, like gourmet cooking and stuff. She helps somebody with like a farm to table cooking school. And I think this kind of all happened around. I mean, I feel like farming kind of goes in between being trendy and not being trendy. But I think a lot of her
mm.
friends really started like appreciating the farm to table movement and stuff. And she could just tell that I was happier uh, and that I was really having an impact on like a lot of people, like just the volunteers that come to work, like both at Shepherd's Corner and here now at Oxbow Farm. Like oftentimes helping out at the farm is like the highlight of somebody else's week, and like how cool is that? That like other people just
Yeah.
helping you do your job is like like sometimes a highlight of the week. So it really is a blessing. It's a very healthy lifestyle.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
I love that. I mean, it's interesting. Like you mentioned, your mom was like, "You could be a doctor." You're. I've previously spoken to someone who was in like medical school, and that it was in that he discerned to become a priest. So I think there's an interesting connection between like highly capable, like intelligent people, and also, diving into really purpose-driven work. And I think it's great that highly intelligent, capable people are diving into purpose-driven work because, your mom is encouraging or saying, she said, you could cure cancer, but I can think of another very worthy cause is the environment. What you mentioned before. So I think that's great. I just wanted to note that trend that I'm seeing in the folks that I'm talking to. And then you said it's a very healthy lifestyle. So I'd love to know more about, the lifestyle of the farm. What does the farm look like? What are you growing, taking care of, cultivating?
Yeah, so, my husband and I have a 17 acres, and he was a big part of, like, just diving in and realizing, like, "Okay, like, I have a life
So he
partner."
was fully on board. He was
Yeah,
like, we're
we
gonna do
actually
this.
there was a discernment process, we dated for probably 4 years on and off. I had actually thought about joining the sisters I was working for a little while. I had discerned with them,
Uh-huh.
and then he got the job in Baltimore. We weren't quite ready to get married, so we broke up, and then we ended up getting back together. Um, Partly after visiting another Catholic worker couple, and they're much older. They're in their 80s. They've been at it for like 60 years, are not burnt out. And we're just like, you know
I
what?
love that.
They did it. Like, let's give it a try. Is this gonna be too crazy? I don't know, but I definitely wouldn't have.
Now, do you keep in touch with that couple?
Yeah, yeah.
Or yeah?
Yeah,
Oh,
Will
I
and
love
Brennan
that.
from Viva House, really amazing people, but yeah, so together we just, like, felt ready to dive in and give it a try, and that was something I kinda learned at Shepherd's Corner, was, like, I don't wanna try to run something on my own, it's just, like, too much.
Was just practically speaking, what does a day on the farm look like? What are you cultivating? What are you
Right.
managing?
Yeah, so we have about 17 acres, we're about 40 minutes north of Baltimore City in Maryland, and we've got we're pretty small scale, but you can still grow a lot of produce. Like our first year, we just did 1/10 of an acre plot and grew about 5,000 pounds off of that, and donated the majority of it. We're up to about a third of an acre now in like intensive vegetable production, and that's enough for like a small CSA, which is like community supported agriculture. It's basically a weekly produce subscription, and then we also go to the
Hmm.
farmers market. So that's kind of like the production side. We also have some berries and fruit trees and stuff, but mostly vegetables is our like main product. Um, and then just for fun for ourselves, we have a small herd of milk goats. They're Nigerian dwarf goats, and we have chickens. So we get eggs. I was a vegetarian for a long time, but now I slaughter and eat my own chickens, which
Wow.
is it's a satisfying process.
I have a
It's
lot of
like
respect for that. Now, and you
on
said the
yeah.
goats and chickens are just for your personal use. So that's your personal milk, eggs, chicken,
Yeah,
etc.
we do sell some eggs, but selling meat and milk there's all kinds of like food safety red tape and stuff. Like you have to have special facilities to be able to do
Got
that. And I
it.
don't think people ever get to that scale. And then also just for fun, I am training a team of draft oxen. I
What's a
kind of
draft oxen?
so like have you seen like draft horses? They like pull carts or they pull a plow,
Yes.
that kind of
Okay.
thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I I have this kind of goal, not really. Part of me just like wants to become technologically Amish, or at least be able to become technologically.
Oh, so you don't have to use like a tractor or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah. It's not practical at given current circumstances, but it's certainly a lot of fun, and it's just like a great way. I've always liked cows or cattle, so just like working with them and training them is a lot of fun. They're 11 months old right now, and they're a small breed, so they're just like big dogs kind of, and you can get them. We had them pull us on a sled when it snowed and stuff like that.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, it's also we I made a yoke for them. We put them in the like it's the Bible talks about being unequally
Mhm.
yoked, and my yoke is easy, my burden is
Mhm.
light. So kind of
Yeah.
getting some of those biblical metaphors in there. So that's a lot of fun. So that's kind of like the basic ecology of the farm, like non-human wise. And then we have this whole human aspect. And something that I really love about daily life in farming is it's something that you can just invite almost anybody into. So we host people through a organization called WWOOF. It's World Opportunities on Organic Farms. It's kind of like Airbnb, but for farming, and there's just like no money exchange. So people come and they get food and housing, and they work I don't know, around 20 30 hours a week on the farm. They get to learn about farming, like eat our amazing produce, and just like dive into our lifestyle for a little while. So
Oh,
um
interesting. So
yeah.
like they're basically exchanging like services for the lodging.
Yes.
It sounds like, am I oversimplifying that?
No, that's exactly
Yeah,
it. Yeah. Yeah,
great.
and food, we feed them.
How
um
many folks through this program do you think you see like on a yearly basis?
Probably maybe close to 100. We've certainly had over 100 in the last 3
Mm.
years. But just like the diversity of people that come through is really
Mhm.
amazing. We've had people from like every continent except Antarctica, of course, like every major religious tradition, all different kinds of backgrounds of life. And I feel like this is a way that I can really connect to the topic you're talking about. From like what I'm seeing, a lot of people come when they're just out of college and trying to figure out what to do with their life and how to find their
Oh,
passion.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, people will take a gap year, or they'll take a month, over the summer break, and want to spend time learning about farming. And then we also get mid-career people who are burnt out from nursing or a job in education, and
Mm.
they're just at their breaking point, and they know they need something different, and like farming is just such a way to like literally ground yourself and reconnect. So it's amazing to like kind of walk with people on that spiritual journey, and at least give them a taste of like what we've chosen, why we've chosen it, and allow them to just fully participate in feeding the chickens, and training the cows, like sowing seeds in the greenhouse, weeding, planting, just all of that stuff is very therapeutic. It certainly was therapeutic for me, and I'm glad that I can share it with other people as well.
That's so interesting. I love what you identified as, this can be a really cathartic experience for someone who might be in that like seeking mode, especially like college grads. Those are the kind of folks that we're definitely trying to speak to. What would you say to someone who feels like they can't decide if their vocation should be their career or something outside of their career. So for example, say someone is, working in nursing and they feel like they need to do something outside of their career, and keep their current career, or how they can't decide. What would you say to someone who was maybe like in that in-betweenness?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we get a lot of people that kind of have this question that they know they want to do something in farming or homesteading, sometimes like with a spiritual mission behind it, sometimes not. But I guess I would ask yourself, like, is your traditional career path that you're either in or that you have in mind, like, is it work that you enjoy or that you at least like find tolerable on a day-to-day basis? And then also think about like, where's your salary coming from? Like, do you feel good about like how you're participating in the economy? Like, is it at least like a
Mm,
neutral thing and not like something that's exploitative or, whatever? And like, if the answer to all those things and you're not doing anything like spectacular, like that's celebrated as saving the planet, but like you're just like helping people live their daily lives, like that can be a very good thing. And like you can find a sense of purpose and meaning and vocation, whether in like a spiritual sense or like maybe more specific Christian sense or not, like just by loving your colleagues, loving your neighbors and sharing that skill set. Like if you're an accountant, um, and you don't feel like you're fulfilling, your full human potential necessarily, but you can help people file their taxes who like couldn't afford to hire an accountant like on the side or something like that. Like there's so many ways
mhm.
that you can like leverage those skills and just like be a good citizen. And um but then on the other hand, if you're someone like who just has that sense of ennui or that sense of restlessness, like then maybe you do need to pursue your, vocation and your work.
Mhm.
And that could overlap with a vocation to marriage as well as it did in my case. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just you just kind of have to really feel it out and ask those questions. And it's okay if like there's nothing wrong with you if you just are enjoying your daily 40-hour, 40-hour week job in the
And
office.
yeah, and then maybe they can just go spend a week at your farm and then and then go back to their regular job. I love how you're highlighting like asking yourself those questions. I also love something that you said earlier, because I wanted to ask, about practical advice for early steps to you can take to find your vocation. And I feel like you hit on one without me even asking. But you talked about how you remembered what a positive experience you had on that service project, and you kept in touch with the order that ran it. And I feel like those are two things, that sound like really great advice for finding a vocation. Remembering what was the moment or when was a time where you felt like you loved the work that you were doing, and also, I mean, practically speaking, networking. Would you say that those two things, like, did those two things occur to you when you were thinking about going into farming?
Yeah, it's funny, I didn't, like, exactly think of them in that way, but that's absolutely true. I think one of the most important questions you can ask yourself is, like, "Who have I met that I want to be like?" Um,
Yes. Hmm.
like, who is doing something that, like, I want to do? Who is living a life or has a sense of peace or a sense of purpose that, like, I want to have? And what does it take to get there? Like for me, when I was in graduate school, I had this pivotal moment where I was at a farming conference and, presenting some of my research and networking with organic farmers and stuff. And I had, I'd heard of this organization called Franklinton Farms in Columbus, has a really good reputation. They do what seems like the impossible thing, which is going into like one of um, the poorest neighborhoods of Columbus where there's crime and violence and just doing urban farming and, developing peace and beauty and like community and relationships. And I was talking to this guy named Patrick and, asking him about what he did. He's like, "Oh, I'm with Franklinton Farms." I'm like, "Oh, you work there?" He's like, "No, I started Franklinton Farms." And he is only maybe 10 years older than me. And that was the first time it occurred to me, like, what? You can do that? Like you can
Right.
start this like amazing organization that just seems like, because I think I was in the process of like looking for job descriptions. I was looking for a job description that like fit the boxes that I want. And I just like I wasn't finding the boxes like,
Right.
in the job descriptions out there. So I would encourage you, rather than looking at job descriptions or careers or whatever, think about people that you find inspiring or lifestyles that you find inspiring, and then figure out how do you do that. Um, I think another thing that's really important to keep in mind is if you have a passion for something or you think that there's like an important um, issue in the world or cause that you want to work on, and there's not like a job that addresses it in the way that you want to address it, like that's an opportunity. And that doesn't mean you should go and start your own organization right away and like try to like tackle
Right.
this big problem. But don't be afraid to take a job that you feel you are overqualified for. If it's for an organization that is addressing that issue, even incompletely.
Hmm.
I think it's so easy to just get caught up in like, well, what's the point? They're not like really solving, everything, or every organization has its shortcomings, has its problems. It's not, nobody's perfect. And you just have to start somewhere. So don't be afraid to take a pay cut or to do some menial work, because there really is a deep sense of meaning and dignity in every career, every line
Hmm.
of work, and you can find that and you can build it, and you might just start at a low spot in an organization and create your dream job that way. Um,
Do you think that that's so interesting what you're hitting on? Do you think that might be a roadblock for some people to find their vocation? Is that hesitation or preconceived notion of like, again, like the capital S should that I mentioned before of like what they should be doing? I mean, when you've spoken to people who are volunteering at the farm and they're talking about finding what's next, like, do they talk about the challenges and the roadblocks that they have?
yeah. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of some people who major in something like, computer science, and they start looking at the jobs there and they're like, I can kind of tolerate them, but like nobody's doing anything that I'm like really passionate about. And yeah, it's definitely a difficult thing. But then that's also where, you get back to that question you asked earlier, which is a really good and important question. Like, does my work need to be my vocation? Because
Hmm.
there's certain remote jobs like, computer science work where it's like, okay, you're doing something good for somebody so that some company or something can function. And you're probably making pretty good money at it. And maybe you only need to do that part time. And then you run your homestead or your farm or your whatever your other
Hmm.
vocation is.
Yeah.
With the money you're making. Like I know a lot of people that can start their farm or start their passion business and they don't know how that's going to do financially, but they like,
Yeah.
it's helpful to have something as a sense of stability. So just starting somewhere, because a lot of the times you're not going to find your dream job like in a position description.
Right. And I think that's so true. And you've talked about, discerning this with your husband. And I'll also mention like I'm in the process of wedding planning, and I just like finished my pre-Cana with my fiance. And it came up the idea of like, what's your definition of enough? And do you have the same vision? And like this idea of like like what is enough, and like how do you plan for that? Because like that tends to inflate if you're not careful. And like, has that been something that you've considered as you've pursued this career for yourself and with
Yeah.
your husband? Yeah.
Are you thinking enough like financially or in terms of like
I
doing.
guess like both, because if you're talking about a vocation, like an overall life satisfaction and things like that, something you said just prompted me to think of that. So I just wanted to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think especially from a Christian perspective, like this question of like what is enough? Like I think that the American, middle class, upper middle class life standard of like enough is actually very unhealthy spiritually. That's something that Jesus talks about almost more than like any other sin, I guess, in the gospels, is like the dangers of wealth for
Hmm.
the spiritual life. And I think the biggest danger in it is the sense of like I can take care of myself, like I'm in control, and like not realizing that like we're ultimately like we're dependent on God. And I think
Hmm.
when you go through like periods of financial instability, you learn to rely on your neighbors and your community and your friends. And I think there's kind of like something like there's like a built-in like spiritual safety net of like not having, more than enough financially. But
It
also
sounds like you, sorry, I just wanted to reflect, but it sounds like you really come to integrate your faith in a very like spiritually like supportive way. And like, it sounds like it's really embedded in everything that you do. Would you say like your faith plays a role in your work as well? I'm guessing the answer is yes. But yeah, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Like, I mean, part of the inclination, I mean, there were just like a lot of things that kind of like led to like the intersection of farming and ecology and faith. But the Catholic worker movement was a really big part of it, and reading about the life and work of Dorothy Day. She was such an amazing woman. And then her co-founder of the movement, which not as many people know about, Peter Marin, he kind of had like the more agrarian vision, and Dorothy Day set up like houses of hospitality for people in the
I was
city.
just going to say, for anyone not familiar with the Catholic worker, can you give like a soundbite summary?
Yeah, yeah. So Dorothy Day started the Catholic worker movement in around the time of the Great Depression. So there were a lot of people who were pretty well educated, unemployed. There just weren't any jobs to be had, or very few. And she started these houses of hospitality that are radically different than like a typical shelter or soup line, and that the people that are being served are living and working with the ones that are serving. So, like the Catholic workers, are volunteers that live in a house, and everybody does chores together, and um, you know, cooks the food, like serves it, and
Hmm. Hmm.
it's just a very family oriented, personalist approach. And I just found it so compelling because, like, when I was living in Columbus, my husband and I had gotten to know some people in, difficult situations, a couple women I got to know that were homeless on and off, and you realize, like, social services can only go so far, and, like, what most people need at the end of the day, like, is a family, and, like, that really is what the
Mm.
gospel calls us to. Um, I mean, the parable of the Good Samaritan is like, asks you to like expand your concept of neighbor and like have this radical familial love for really just anybody who crosses your path. And it's a big ask. But just learning about Dorothy Day, and there are like Catholic worker houses around the country that do this. They just
Mm.
welcome strangers into their home and love them. And it's often, chaotic and crazy. You just never know what's gonna happen. Um, but but you're just so often surprised by love and just a sense of like security and development, and just like blessings that come when people feel that they have a family and somebody that they can trust, and they have that stability. So I that was actually a big impetus. As much as I loved working with the sisters, they did a beautiful job of like integrating ecology and faith, and we would do workshops and spiritual retreats and stuff. But we couldn't house people on the land that we were farming, and I really just wanted to be able to like bring people in and
Hmm.
provide an environment where they can flourish and get to know their creator, or whatever version of spirituality like makes sense to them. That's something that's wonderful about farming, is it connects, like anybody can really connect to it. And like a lot of people of faith like really find a deep sense of consolation and relationship with God. And a lot of people who are agnostic or spiritual but not religious also just have a deep sense of connection and purpose and meaning. So just being able to like kind of like shepherd those experiences for people is definitely like the main reason. Like, I'm not just farming to grow produce for people. Like, we're farming
Right. Yeah,
to
there's more of a
participate in
purpose.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Mhm.
I love that. Well, I mean, it certainly sounds fulfilling. And I've loved getting to know your story even more and chatting with you today. So thank you for joining. But I also want to ask a couple of questions that we usually ask our guests. And one is that, our podcast is called You, Me, and Ennui. And, ennui being that sense of like blahs, listlessness in between. And, is there anything giving you a sense of ennui right now?
It's a good question. You know, I would say farming is a pretty good general cure for ennui because there is just
Really? Okay.
always something to do, like, and always new challenges, both physical and just intellectual. Like, you're not just a farmer, you're a veterinarian, you're a soil chemist, you have to be a plumber sometimes when your irrigation, blows and stuff like that. So I almost never feel bored, but a little bit. I'm actually about 12 weeks pregnant right now, and the last couple weeks have been, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful.
Thank you. But I've definitely had days of just, like, constant nausea, like, can't get off the couch,
Oh,
like, and just like, "Oh, I feel so tired," of just feeling tired, especially because 'cause I'm the kind of person that likes to get up and do things and stay active and
yeah.
stuff. So I've been feeling a little bit of ennui in that
Yeah.
sense, like, but even those moments, it's good to remember that we're limited, we're human beings, not human doings, and just, like, take time to
Amen. Hmm.
recover and just suffer, offer it up to the Lord. Um, you know, it's definitely a lot to be said for that kind of suffering. But anyways, yeah, so that's about it. Just
That's so
yeah.
exciting. Congratulations. And that's a
Thank
really
you.
good reflection on, your body is growing another person. And so you are doing something.
Yeah, it's
So
enough. Sometimes it's
that's
enough
yeah,
to
exactly.
carry another person. Mm.
Well, before we say farewell for now, can you tell us about what's next for the farm? Besides, another person being added, but what's next for the farm and how can people get involved or learn more about what you do?
Yeah. As for what's next for the farm, the new person is definitely the biggest, upcoming addition, and also, this is gonna be a big year of us trying to, like, figure out how we structure everything because, I mean, historically, I've been able to manage everything with volunteers that come and go, and, like, we're at a scale where if we don't get anybody or our volunteers are not particularly helpful, we can manage it on our own, but, like, can I do that with a toddler? I don't know. So,
Hmm.
we're gonna try, like, a more structured internship to recruit people who are a little bit longer term and, like, more invested and can actually do more of the hospitality work, that we're doing and, like, orient new people and give farm tours and stuff like that. So, praying that that goes well and that we can keep carrying on our mission, at least in some capacity, in addition to the chaos of family life. But yeah, as for how to connect, if you want the full experience, check us out on WWOOF. You can sign up to come for a day, a weekend, a week, a month, whatever. Just reach out and we'll see if we've got openings. And even if you're not anywhere near Maryland, like you can try woofing it. It's a worldwide thing. It's certainly a nationwide thing, but you could try going to a local farm near you and see if that helps a little bit with a sense of restlessness. Also, if you just want our farm updates, we do a quarterly newsletter. So you can sign up for that on our website. It's www.oxbowfarm.net. And we also have, along with the quarterly newsletter, we do a blog of topics at the intersection of faith and ecology. So those are all ways to stay connected.
That's fantastic. And all those will be linked in the show notes so people can find out more. Julie, this has really been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations. We'll be thinking of you. And yeah, thanks again for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the time, Mary Kate. It's been fun.